Akatsuki wa Sadota. Nidalee, Nico, Conan, Itachi, Kisame, Sasori, Deidara, Kakuzu, Hida, Orochimaru, そして絶。
Et je m'appelle Sasuke. Sasuke Uchiwa.
Welcome to Casuals of Runeterra, episode 133. I'm your host Ryan, here with the other host Edge.
We are... Well, I don't know why anyone's listening to us. I thank you guys for listening to us, but I don't know why you're here. I wouldn't listen to us.
Oh man, had to start with the It's funny because that I feel like that's if anyone challenges me and they're like, "Hey, how much of a nerd are you?" You got to go in the tank. List them in order as they were presented.
Oh my god. Hey, you just had to do that without warning me, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, man. But yeah, we're back. And we're talking about, I mean, she was in the list. Nidalee today.
Yeah, if you know, that'd be hard for people to keep up with if they weren't on, you know, up to date on the Akatsuki members. I swear.
But one member we forgot to mention, housekeeping, up top. You can listen to us everywhere. Email us at podcastcore@gmail.com. Visit us at podcastcore.com for all of our info. Remember, that's COR. And then follow us on all the platforms because that's how we, you know, get a boost in discoverability. So we appreciate that. Leave a like and comment. But word of mouth is how we've gotten this far. So tell one friend to learn to hunt the most dangerous game by listening to the Casuals of Runeterra podcast.
Yep, and Nidalee is definitely one who takes, you know, almost a bit of pleasure in hunting the most dangerous of game. But
yeah,
we'll cover why. We'll cover why. We'll cover how she gets there.
Yeah, and I want to start off, you know, main topic, the Legend of Tarzan. You understand why. There's a lot of themes with Nidalee's story that's really cool, specifically what Nidalee is and how she fits into the Ixtali jungle and how that plays a part in Shurima and then how other nations and how they interact with it. That's all cool stuff that we get through Nidalee, because in our previous episode, which you should listen to, we talked about Nico, and Nico's only there for a bit of her, you know, early life. Post the tragedy in her homeland. So going to Nidalee, we get to actually talk about this area. And unfortunately, you know, I'm going to warn you, a lot of these cards, we're going to kind of edge you a bit because there's some foreshadowing happening for the next episode. So this is one of those episodes where you're going to want to listen to this one and the one that comes after it.
Yeah, you know, we've been putting, you know, like the story episode with the champion episode for a little bit now, but, you know, there's always room for improvement. So now we got to tease that next episode. Get wrecked, kids.
So we start like we always start on the bio episodes with the spell, and that spell is Face Check, which is the worst way to explore. So Face Check is 100%. A one-cost burst spell that says manifest a card with ambush. So talk about ambush real quick. With the ambush mechanic, what happens is if you play a card, it creates another card called Shadow in the Brush, and we'll talk about that in a bit. And that kind of, think about like face-down cards sort of in Yu-Gi-Oh! Maybe.
Yeah, I think trap cards.
I think we have a comparison in like Magic.
Like in Magic, I don't think there's really much of a comparison to it,
Yeah.
because I do think like trap cards are probably like the best comparison for this. And it's kind of weird. Like this is a mechanic that is like, or at least to me, is unique to Runeterra. There may be someone out there who has like knowledge of like some other card games that I haven't played a lot of, because I haven't played a lot of like Gwent or Elder Scrolls, like games like that. So maybe there's something that's more comparable in those games. Okay. But I think the trap card in Yu-Gi-Oh is like the best comparison, because it's like, it's there, but you don't know what it is. Or maybe like secrets in Hearthstone.
Okay, yeah, that's another one. Yeah.
But without like, without so many barriers to triggering it, right? Yeah. Like it's there's less hoops that your opponent has to jump through to trigger it. Okay. I feel like.
But that makes sense.
Like, hit us up at podcastcore@gmail.com and tell us how wrong we are and what's the right comparison.
But here we would like the flavor of the card, which says jungle reconnaissance is the least desirable assignment for one reason above all. It is full of surprises.
And an ambush is definitely a surprise. Yeah. I have one beef with this card, and that one beef is that now it is going to introduce a conversation of like, when is the right time to cast the spell, right? Because there's some decks are going to want to cast it at different times compared to other decks with how you build it, but that means that people are going to ask like, oh well, I think now's a good time to face check, and for League of Legends players, they're never going to entertain that conversation. What do you mean now's the right time to face check? You never face check. Don't face check. All right. So Runeterra players, don't tell the League of Legends players when it's time to face check, because they will not listen. Because it has been ingrained since like the first 50 hours of gameplay. You never face check.
They're always there. It doesn't matter what bush it is. They're in all of them.
They're all 5 of them are there.
So this takes us to our follower, which is Avenging Vastaya and Shadow in the Bush, in a bush, which I referenced just a while ago. So this is an important character. It's not direct one-to-one, like the person that's in this image. It's a reference to this type of Vastaya in the Ixtali jungle.
Yes. And again, we kind of put it in the housekeeping bit. We're teasing, all right? So if you want to know more about why, like, the kind of Vastaya in this character is important, you're going to have to stay tuned for the next episode. Sorry, guys.
So it's a 3-cost, 3/3 with Ambush 3, has Spell Shield as well. And it says, when I transform from Avenging Vastaya's Ambush, play Enough. And Enough stops all enemy fast spells, slow spells, and skills. And yeah, there's a lot going on with this card.
Yeah, this one is like as far as this card, like this is why I like kind of went with the Hearthstone comparison, because this really feels like Counterspell in Hearthstone, except not nearly as oppressive because it's an Ambush 3. So it's not quite as oppressive, but I mean, it could still be a thing of like, oh, well, crap. Like there goes everything I was trying to do. And like having effects like this in card games is something that I really like. I think it's healthy as far as for gameplay, but it never feels good to be on the other side. Sorry. Yeah. There's no way to make you feel good about being on the receiving end of this. It's not possible. You just have to accept that it's good for the game. Right?
Yeah, you have to believe in the developers. And I will correct, I've been saying shadow in a bush, and it's shadow in the brush. Which, listen, come on. You can give me that one, right?
I think we could give it to you, but this is also the internet, so I imagine someone's going to do something horrible with it. Just just brace yourself.
And Shadow in the Brush is a 2-cost 2/2 spell that says, "What could be hiding here?" in question mark, and it has some flavor on it that says, "You never know what could be concealed in the underbrush."
And like we said with the previous card, it's all 5 of your enemies. All 5 of them are in the underbrush. Don't face check.
You know what's funny? If you look at the image of Shadow in the Brush, there's 5 sets of eyes.
I didn't
Uh-huh.
even count. I didn't even count.
Do we give this one to Riot? Do you think they did it on purpose? Do we give this to them?
Oh yeah, I think we have
Okay.
to give it to them because I mean that's just been how many years has League of Legends players been telling new players those exact words?
Yeah.
All right, I'll give it to them.
Okay.
If we're gonna give you, the shadow in the bush, we have to give this to Riot.
Okay, deal. So this takes us to, this episode gets weirder and weirder and further away from our standard format, but we have a landmark, which
Let's
is
go.
Bushwhack Trap. And this is a 2-cost landmark that says when I'm summoned or the first time an ally transforms each round, grant the weakest enemy vulnerable this turn. But what I care about most is obviously the flavor, which is Blood on the Wind, said by Nidalee, but the image. So if you look at the image, you have the Vestaya from the Avenging Vestaya card, and they're laying traps, which are like natural traps. And we'll talk about the difference between the natural traps and the metal traps, which is a big deal if you've played against Nidalee in the game. Spoilers. But it has a story aspect as well.
Yes, and the story aspect is something that we will get into later. Get wrecked if you want that now. But obviously, we've talked at great lengths before how much we like the abilities of Challenger and Vulnerable in this game. So for obvious reasons, I like this card. I really like this card. But I won't dive too much into it because like that more of the details is for next episode. Yeah. Now I will say the art is wonderful on this. You should check it out anyways because it's Nidalee's traps. Like if you've been playing League of Legends, those are her traps. Like they went ahead and just slapped them right into the game. So like fantastic on them for that.
So let's get into it. Let's do this.
Let's
talk
do
about
this.
the Madam.
All right. So for obvious reasons, today's episode is Nidalee. All right, but let's talk about where Nidalee is. All right, because this we've talked about like Shurima at great lengths on our show, and we've talked about some of the other kingdoms that were absorbed by the Shuriman Empire, like with our Jax and Zillion episodes, and Acathia being absorbed. So if you're looking at Shurima, most of like major Shurima is on a map. It's towards the west. And then there's this giant desert in between that is the Great Sai, right? And that's where a lot of the nomadic tribes of present day Shurima kind of go back and forth all across the Great Sai, following other wildlife for survival. And nomads kind of like with Talia's family, all right? So that's like the middle. Further west is where the Shuriman Empire grew. And then east, all the way on the eastern end of the Great Sai, is where you see the lands like Acathia and then the jungles of Ixtal. All right. And the jungles of Ixtal is where Nidalee's story is taking place.
Yeah, think of it like the Amazon rainforest.
Yes. And this is... it's something that like towards the end of her bio is brought up, but I'll bring it up now just for the sake of making the statement. It is the most uncharted land in all of Runeterra. All right. And this isn't like with Ionia or with the Shadow Isles, where they are very far removed from the main continent. So they're just physically hard to get to begin with. And they have a lot of like connections with the spirit worlds, whether positive or very negative for the Shadow Isles.
Yeah.
So they're not charted too well for obvious reasons. But this is uncharted just because of how dense the wildlife is, with how dangerous it is on top of that. So most people go in and they just don't come back.
Yeah,
right?
based on what you just said, geographically, it's in the middle of the world. So everywhere has access to it, quote unquote, but no one's fucking going there.
I mean, like, if you think about it off of like the major civilized nations, Bilgewater's really close to this.
Yeah.
Piltover and Zon is very, very close to this.
Yeah.
And we know, like, characters like Ezreal, there are many people who are very interested in learning more about these regions. And like Ezreal's parents, sometimes they just don't come back. So, but this is where Nidalee's story takes place. And it begins with her as being found as a little cub. All right. So she is in cat form when she is found, and she is found by a mother Paka. All right. So Paka or Paka is I'm going to go with Paka.
Paka's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to go with Paka. All right. And they are very cat-like species of predators in the Ixtal jungles. So this mother Paka, it finds Nidalee, and we don't know why. She can tell that there's something wrong with Nidalee.
Yeah.
But she does decide to go ahead and bring her into the family. So she rescues this baby Nidalee, drags her into her den, and treats her as one of her own kids. So this young Nidalee, who is in cat form, is found by a big cat and is raised as a Paka. All right. So that is, her beginnings are very much like, if you've watched the movie Tarzan, like the Disney movie Tarzan, it's very much like that, of just, playing with the other young Paka and then being taught how to be an adult Paka by the adults.
Yep.
Now, where we differentiate from Tarzan's story is that this whole time she looks like a cub.
Yeah.
She looks like a Paka. All right. And then when she starts getting a little bit older, there would be times where she becomes very sick. If anyone out there doesn't have experience raising kids, growing pains, like those kids will usually run fevers and stuff anyways.
Yeah.
Because that's just what the body's doing to prepare itself to grow. But for Nidalee, when she would do that, she'd run really bad fevers, and then her paws would start shifting into weird hairless digits.
Like a raccoon.
Like a raccoon. And then she would be bipedal, like halfway, and so she would start kind of transforming into a humanoid beast.
Yeah.
But it was nothing like the Nidalee that you see from like the Champion portrait and stuff. All right. It is, we're talking about like a monster, like it's something that like a cartoon comedy would have, like coming out on screen going, "Please kill me."
Like the movie The Fly.
Yeah, like the movie The Fly. So this is something that like she had to deal with as far as growing up, is every now and then she would start shape-shifting and she had no control over it. And the only consistent that would happen is that there was always these visions, which, I mean, if your fever's running really bad, it's not uncommon to hallucinate, but she would have these visions of these two silhouettes that looked like humans that were beckoning to her, and she could feel a spiritual warmth from these silhouettes. So every time that she would go through these transformations, she would try to leave. But her adopted mother, this Paka, would bring her back to the den and constantly reinforce that you do not go outside. Like, the den is safety. That everywhere the light touches is our kingdom. All right. So
it also reinforces what we talked about in Nico's episode when she decides to leave, and how difficult of a time she has convincing Nidalee and the rest to do so, because since she was a cub, she's reinforced, you stay in the jungle. Do not go outside.
yes, and now we know that it's like it was mom that was telling her. It was like, hey, if the street lights turn on, you got to be back in the den. Okay, those are the rules. All right, and despite the fact that these transformations, the silhouettes beckoning her, is kind of weird, for the most part, she is living a normal life. She gets to grow up with her brothers and sisters. She does get to explore out in the jungle, just so long as she stays in the jungle and comes back home. And there's nothing too far out of the ordinary. And everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. The Fire Nation in this episode is going to be played by a group of hunters that are journeying into the jungle. And it is a group of Vistayan hunters that are known as the Kilash. So this tribe or these hunters from the Kilash Vistaya tribe have journeyed into the territory of Nidalee's family.
Yeah.
And obviously, since they're in the territory, Nidalee's mom is like, hey, get the hell out of my house.
Yeah.
And she engages the hunters. And unfortunately, despite fighting very valiantly, these are very skilled hunters, and Nidalee's mom is mortally wounded.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in this moment where she sees her mother basically, dead, essentially, despite the fact that, like she's basically lost her mother, and these invaders are now going to turn on her and her brothers and sisters. Nidalee decides to pounce into action. So a Paka version of Nidalee jumps on these hunters, starts fighting desperately to protect her mom and her family. And despite fighting so hard, because of the weapons that these skilled hunters have, she can't quite get in to make any meaningful damage. So she does the next best thing. Fuels into her rage and her desire to saving her family, she's able to shapeshift into the form that we know as human Nidalee.
Yeah.
And it's in this form that she's with her, natural reflexes, because she has the reflexes of basically a panther. It's with these reflexes that she's able to grab one of these spears off of the Kilash and start using their own weapons against them.
Yeah.
And this is how she also gets a spear that she's very well known for in game. And after she's able to ward off the hunters and scare them to the point where they're willing to give up, she realizes that the noises that they're making, she can understand them now.
Mm-hmm.
And she hears them running off. And when they're running off, they are cursing her, but they're cursing her Vistaya Share heritage.
Mm-hmm.
And so this Vistaya Shire, as far as at this point, we don't really know too much about the Vistaya Shire.
Yeah.
And obviously Nidalee doesn't have a fucking clue what that means, because she just knows Paka, food, sleep.
Yeah,
that's all she knows.
And going back to our previous Nico episode, is when Nico runs into Nidalee and Nidalee runs into Nico, they both kind of look at each other like, what the fuck are you? But they're both confusing creatures.
Yeah. So this is the major difference here is that the Kilash actually kind of have an idea of what Nidalee is.
Yeah.
It's not the same meeting as with Nico, where they're both doing the Spider-Man meme.
Yeah.
They know where Nidalee hails from and where her powers come from, and decide, it's better to just go ahead and get out of here, cut our losses, and leave. So Nidalee is able to find her home, but it does kind of leave questions what is the Vistaya Share? But in the aftermath of the Kilash leaving, it is now Nidalee. She's there with her mother in her last moments. So she's in human form holding her mother while she passes away. And for whatever reason, it's most likely because they are still able to recognize her scent. The other Paka, so her brothers and sisters, they don't shy away from Nidalee, despite the fact that it's a human holding their dying mother.
Yeah.
They recognize that it's still Nidalee. They recognize that Nidalee saved them, so they start, following Nidalee. And Nidalee decides that, okay, well, it's time for me to step up and be the new leader of this pack. And it's from this point on, this is where Nidalee starts growing into the Nidalee that we know. So she's able to use her human form, and now the newfound Paka superpower of deposable thumbs to start better protecting their home. She's able to create makeshift lanterns. She's able to make booby traps, and she's able to make salves with all the local fauna and plants.
She becomes a medic.
To take care of her family. That combined with the fact that she could still transform into being a Paka, and thus lead them on hunts and all this stuff. So this is how Nidalee becomes the leader of this pack. And it's after all of that has gone down that she does meet another shapeshifter, Nico.
Yep.
And now this is where like it kind of like reinforces too that whole Nico and Nidalee both looking at each other like, what the fuck are you?
Yeah.
Because for Nidalee, like the only thing that she's ever heard with the shapeshifting ability is this Vastaya Shire. And it's like, hey, is that you? And Nico's like, what are you talking about? And it's like, oh, well, I guess that's not you. But now that Nico is there, she joins a pack and they get to, go out, hunt, live life to their fullest, all the way up to the point where Nico decides that she has bigger plans in store for her. And despite that, she wants Nidalee to go with her. She's not going to stop. She's not going to stop this journey just because Nidalee won't join her.
Yeah.
So Nico departs, and it leaves Nidalee with her pack. She's content knowing that she's there to defend her family and her home, but losing Nico further reminds her that she doesn't have all the answers about who she is. And then it is bothering her a little bit. And that's where her bio kind of leaves off, is that she's still unsure about herself, but she knows that her place is with her family in the jungles of Ixtal.
Yeah, and one thing I want to reinforce here is relatively, Nico and Nidalee are both young versions of their specific race, right? So a lot of, like, Nico is still learning a lot of stuff about what she is, and a lot of her history was destroyed due to the incident. And Nidalee, I mean, she was taken in as a young cub, quote unquote, and all she knows is that life, right? She doesn't know anything leading up to her being created or born or whatever. So it adds to the confusion, right? No one, you can't have the answers when it's like the two youngest people in the room are the last ones that we know, or the ones that we are familiar with. So that's also a neat little dynamic.
Yes, and I'm glad that you reinforce that. It's like that they are young, right? Like this is, like but we've covered like a lot of like different heroes here,
Yeah.
and as far as like whenever we say like young, relatively young or not, like you have to remember like what some of these youngsters are going through.
Yeah.
Like I really Kaisa
Rise.
rise. Like there's like they have to go through a lot.
Yeah.
And I mean for Nidalee, like it's that combination of like figuring out that you're so different than your surroundings while also having no answers provided, and then having to watch your mother die on top of it.
Yeah.
It's a lot. There's a lot going on. So, but hey, that does take us to the card.
Mhm.
And this card's wild.
Great art. Amazing art.
Yeah, the art
Yes.
is amazing. I am not entirely thrilled by the art because despite how good it is, and I love this depiction of Nidalee, they put more clothes on her.
God damn it. I knew it. I should have known better.
I'm going to hell. I'm going to hell.
Listeners.
No, this is such a better look for Nidalee because I mean, like,
Yeah.
This episode's called Tarzan. This is how Tarzan's gonna look. All
Yeah.
right, like so. Open up this card art and just
And they add a
appreciate
lot
it.
to her as far as like more feather adornment, which
Yeah, like,
plays
I mean-
into her friendship with Nico, right?
Yeah, and then like the human side just looks like more tribal.
Yep.
Like it's so good. It's really good.
Hey,
All right?
Riot, you know that game you have that makes almost billions of dollars? How about you update the models? All of them.
Yeah, all of them. I mean, it's not like Nidalee has like one of the worst models in game currently, just because of how long she's been in the game.
Just 4 blocks and a 5th block for the sphere.
We could be trapped here forever. All right.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So we've got Nidalee is a 4 mana 5/3,
Yeah.
and she's a champion, so she has to have quick attack.
Mhm.
And she also has ambush 2. And with the level up, I've seen you summon or transform 4 other allies.
Yeah.
So this is I do like the fact that it has quick attack on this champion specifically, just because one, like Nidalee plays in human form as a long range character, but also the fact that like she has to see the transformations or summons. Like you don't want a 5/3 being a backline hero.
Yeah.
You know, like this that, not to mention that like something like that could also be like really toxic, like back in the day of like the LeBlanc and Sivir decks.
Oh my gosh.
Oh Lord, like what a flashback.
Listen,
All right,
I was one of those abusers. I apologize, but I'm clean now.
Please, we're both aggro players. You think you think that I'm not culpable in this? Oh goodness. Yeah, so she is 5/3 quick attack, and when she flips into the pack mother Nidalee. All right. Now we want to talk about like upgraded art.
Yeah.
Like let's talk about cat form Nidalee, because holy cow. Like this is, especially when we get to our next episode covering Nidalee, like I need everyone to open the card art for Pack Mother Nidalee and really breathe it in and imagine that is what the characters from her story are witnessing. Because it's going to set a lot of things into like better placement in your imagination. But Pack Mother Nidalee is a 6/4 with quick attack and overwhelm with ambush 2. And she also has Nexus Strike, transform me back into Nidalee and create a javelin toss in hand. So one, I love the fact that we still get the javelin toss. Like that is easily my favorite part about Nidalee from League of Legends.
Yep.
It just like, you know, throwing out a spear and seeing if someone dies is just so satisfying.
It was also one of the first major rewarding skill shots, right? Where it's like, hey, this is tough to pull off because you have to transform. And while you transform in the game, the movement's kind of weird. And then you have to also hit it. And it did a shit ton of damage. It was big for the pro scene at the time. Like it was a very amped up moment.
I mean, it was very big. Like there's entire pro comps built around poke damage. And Nidalee was perfect for that, not only for the damage she brought, but for the fact that she could heal. So you basically had two supports with a damage dealer. So as far as like the Javelin Toss that's produced, it is a 0 mana slow speed spell. Deal 4 damage to an enemy. If there are no enemies when I'm played, I target the enemy nexus instead. So this gives you that little bit of like kind of a timer, because it's constantly removing the enemy threats while also being, you know, that timer at the end of like, if you're not going to play creatures because you're afraid I'm going to javelin them, I'm just going to deal 4 to your face.
Yeah.
You take 5 spears, you're dead.
And there's a story. Like, listen, when we say Riot's good at this, there's a story element to this javelin text as well, where if I can't get one of your guys, I'm going to where the guys are hanging out. Right? Like it fits that same narrative.
It's like they did a great job with this card, and they also did a great job of giving us a way to like set up our next episode. Because let's look at the flavor text. So the flavor text on the front side: I will always protect you, lizard girl. We will make these poachers pay together. And that's a direct quote from Nidalee, and that takes us over to the other side of the card. And oh boy, the men call her Kashdaji as an insult, but she commands the jungle, and they cannot hide the fact that they are afraid. And that is from Anura's field journal, which our listeners that listen to the Nico episode will remember Anura. So yeah, like she's got all the Vestayan hunters cussing her out and everything, and they're still pissing themselves while they're doing it for good reason too.
And the Anora's journal is something we could probably do a side episode on, because there's a collection of cards. Because with Nidalee, when she came out, there's wildlife also in the jungle, right? It's the Amazon rainforest. So there's a lot of different cards that have text as well. That's interesting, that we do want to touch on at some point, and that may be an avenue for us to do it.
Absolutely. And it's also like a great avenue for Riot to pull content for the MMO, because I mean, an entirely unexplored area of Runeterra that also has like some of like, you know, some of players' favorite champions that reside there, like Nidalee, Rengar, Nico shows up for a bit, Malphite. Um, yeah, yeah, like the content's there, baby. Give us the MMO already.
So that's the end of the show, and we're gonna get to the part now where we want to do a little bit of discussion. And the part is what I thought was fun: is what is Nidalee, right? For Nico, we have more of an idea because we are introduced to the elders versions of her. And even though the way their Shoma works is mysterious, what they are isn't so much, right? And how they function. But with Nidalee, because she can only transform between human and cub, and when she's found, she's already in cub form, it begs the question, okay, like we like to reference our Annie episode, we know what magic does to pregnancies. So
Oh
if there's a
no.
human involved in some cross, because we also know in the past there have been, I don't call them rogue Vistayas in a negative sense, but Vistayas that interact with humans more than other Vistaya who just kind of keep to themselves, and crossbreeding and things like that, right? So a mixture of a world where you have magic going rampant, magical pregnancies, crossbreeding between realms. It's still hard to guess what she is, but I think we can get pretty close.
I mean, we might be able to get pretty close. Like just in our most recent episodes, we've covered a lot that involve Vastaya, like with Nico, but also with Set, because
Mm-hmm.
Set, you know, is a product of a Vastayan with a Noxus pit fighter.
Yeah.
So like we know that, like, you know, like humans and Vastayas, they both like to procreate.
Mm-hmm.
So
Both like
that's
to party.
definitely it is definitely a possibility. I'm like more curious to know like if it is a product of like one of those pregnancies,
Mm-hmm.
or just because of the location, if it's like a disturbance with the spiritual realm and Nidalee just kind of got spat out.
Oh, yeah.
Because this is we're talking about the Ixtali jungle, all right? The Ixtali, like we already talked about its geographical location, and if you remember where I put it, it is very near. It is very near Icathia. And if you listen to any of our episodes following Icathian heroes, there's a lot that could cause a spiritual disturbance that happened in Icathia.
And that applies to my Runation book listeners as well, because we've talked about the recent appearance of Icathian cuneiforms.
Yes.
So anytime you hear Icathia, just know, oh shit.
Oh shit is right. And so I'm kind of more curious if it is like because I like this is one of those things where like we're like the spirit world is still kind of like unclear to us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not so much that it's unclear to us because we don't have the information. It's unclear to us because there's only one region that cares about the information, and that's Ionia.
Yeah.
So Ionia is like, yeah, we have the doors to the spirit world, but we know that like these kind of worlds that are existing right next to Runeterra, they don't follow the same rules. Cough, cough, Vandal City. So, like, if there was a threat that, like, that it's one of those universe / we like to call them the galaxy-wide threats. And one like the void is one of those galaxy-wide threats because they consume everything to non-existence.
Yeah.
And that would include the spirit world. And the spirit world is kind of living hand in hand with Runeterra, despite the fact that people really only know about it in Ionia.
Mm-hmm.
So what if the void is causing enough damage to where the spirit world was like, you know, getting eaten up too, and somebody went, oh crap, take my baby, and just hurled Nidalee through a portal before they got eaten up, and she ended up in the jungles of Ixtali.
I mean, what it comes down to is there's two people who know. Shen or Zillion.
And if we've learned anything from our episodes covering Shen and Zillion, they're never going to tell us.
No. Zillion can't and Shen won't.
Yeah, so I like that's a hard one to pin.
Yeah.
I think that, like, you know, I think that a pregnancy, so like one of a Styan sailor hooking up with somebody in like a Shuriman port, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
That seems more plausible. But I'm not ready to write off that, like, because there's so much going on in this area alone,
Yeah.
that I'm not willing to write off that maybe she just came from somewhere that nobody knows, which kind of also backs up, like, even Nico being like, what the hell are you?
Yeah, and that's why in this, you know, this back end section, I wanted to bring it up and kind of go deeper into it, because we mentioned it early in the episode, and it's the part that makes Nidalee's story the most interesting, is because Riot was able to find this. I mean, with all the fun stuff that we have so much information on, the background of the Styans, the Spirit Realm, etc. We talked about Nico last episode. To still have a point of interest to make Nidalee very interesting with a core story that we've heard before, right? Tarzan, right? So,
Yes.
props to him for keeping it a little bit spicy.
Yeah, I mean, I like it whenever you're going to take one of these stories that have been played before. You know, I like it when you take that story and at least provide information with it, right?
Yeah.
Because it gives me, the reader, reason to pay attention. Like, I don't have a reason to just kind of like gloss over and let an audiobook go in the background while I don't care.
Yeah.
Because I am getting information of, like, because what if she is, you know, what if she's like offspring with the with the Vestayan hunters, but like it was one of the hunters that like went away from that pack. We don't know that. And it's like, okay, but they seem to recognize what she is, but they're calling it something different than what they are. So what is that difference? It gives you something to hold on to, which is nice to have, because then I don't have to be like, oh no, Tarzan's mom's gonna die. Yeah, I saw that in the movie. I knew it was gonna happen.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, so listen, who would have thought Nidalee would be one of our longer episodes in a while, and we still have more to talk about in her story episode. But for now, if you stuck around, and even if you didn't make it this far, which you're not hearing this, thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with the next episode.
Yeah, only the real ones get to hear. Take care, everybody.